Welcome to Pop Psych 101,
where we, licensed therapist Ryan and
licensed psychologist Dr. Hayley Roberts,
break down and analyze how mental health is represented in movies, shows, books, and across the pop culture and social media landscape.
We will determine what lines up with real life and what is just pop culture fantasy.
This is Pop Psych 101.
Hey Ryan, let's chat a little bit about making podcasts. You and I have kind of talked a bit with our listeners in previous episodes and things like that about how we got started and what this journey in creating this podcast has been like for us. And now we've got an ad that can maybe help some of our listeners if they're interested in starting their own podcast.
Yeah, and Hayley, when I first started this podcast a long time ago, it was super complicated. But, the great thing that we have now, which is Spotify, Spotify's got a platform that lets you make a podcast super easily and then distribute it everywhere and even earn money all in one place for free. So it's called Spotify for Podcasts, and this is how it works. Basically, Spotify for Podcasts let you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer. So no matter what your setup is, you can start creating today. Then you can distribute your podcast to Spotify and everywhere else podcasts are heard.
You also have the option to make video podcasts, when you really want to take those conversations to the next level, to get your fans involved. You can use Q&As and polls to really get them invested in the conversation about your podcast. So with Spotify for podcasters, you can also earn money in a variety of ways, including creating podcast subscriptions or including ads. And I think the best of all, and something that you and I have both found very helpful, is that it's totally free without any catch and lets you get your podcast out there.
Yeah, and we highly recommend that you give this a try. Being able to do this podcast for us the last couple of years has been such a joy, and now it's easier than ever. So download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started today.
And enjoy making your podcast.
Welcome back to Pop Psych 101. I am just Ryan Engelstad, licensed therapist, here as always with my co-host. Hi, Barbie.
Hi, Ken.
Hi, Dr. Hayley Roberts. How are you?
I was trying to think of a Rhinuff, like a Kenuff.
Yes. Yeah. We're going to hit tons of references like that. This is going to be a really fun episode. If it hasn't already been clear, today we are talking about Barbie. And we're just kind of assuming that everyone's already seen it because it's crossed $1 billion. It's not out on streaming yet, but it is probably going to be in theaters for a little while. If it's still in theaters when this episode comes out, go see it. If not, it should be on streaming services soon. So Hayley, before we get into the episode and talk about Barbie, obviously this movie was very nostalgic for a lot of people and thinking about their own childhoods, in particular the toys they grew up with and the toys they played with as a child. We have the sort of mother and daughter in the real world characters to kind of experience Barbie's journey through the audience's eyes in a lot of ways. So I was wondering, for you, did this bring you back to any of your own childhood toy experiences?
Yeah. So I was definitely more of I had certain stuffed animals that were like my core toys, but I definitely went through a Barbie phase, and it wasn't very long and it wasn't as intense as most girls, but I definitely went through a Barbie phase, and all I ever wanted was a Barbie kitchen. That's all I ever wanted. Who knows why, but I did. But I also thought of these two Barbies that I had. One was a Barbie with a mermaid tail, and when you put it in water, the tail changed colors.
Sure.
And then there was one where you could cut the Barbie's hair, but then you could replace, there was Velcro hair.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
But I never wanted to buy the new the replacement hair pieces, so I never cut the hair because I was intimately aware that if I cut it, it wouldn't grow back. And I was I don't want to ruin my Barbie. So I kind of loved the weird Barbie character because I was I was always somebody who wanted to keep my Barbies really pristine. So yeah, I definitely went through a slight Barbie phase. I didn't have any of the Ken toys. I think I had like
Poor Ken.
I know. I had like 3 Barbies and a skipper, I
Sure.
think.
Sure.
I can't even really remember because it was so short-lived, but
Hmm.
yeah. But then I was very much like a play outside in the dirt kind of gal.
Sure.
But yeah, so when I think back on toys, for some reason, like, oh, you know what toy I had that I loved so much? I had a Polly Pocket, but
Nice.
before they became the like 3-inch high ones, I had one of the ones where they were like 3 centimeters
Like
high.
actually tiny. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And the one that I had, it was like a fairy tale book was like the case, and then you opened it up and it was under the top half was above the ocean, and then the bottom half was below the ocean, and there was like
Cool.
shells and mermaids and crabs. And I used to take, because we also would travel a lot, and I would take
Sure.
that everywhere with me because that's an easy toy to like, it's a whole scene in such a small space. Oh, and then I also had the Sky Dancers. Do you remember
Mm-hmm.
those? It had like
Oh
a,
yeah, like you spin them up and let them
yeah,
go, kind of thing.
so you like
Yeah.
hold, there's a fairy basically in this structure, and then you pull it and it spins out and the fairy like flies. So I think those were kind of like my main toys that I can
Okay.
remember. Yeah, so kind of a Barbie girl. And then obviously I loved that song by Aqua. How about you? Do you have a toy? Were you a
Well, I was
GI
gonna say
Joe guy?
first, I was gonna say,
Yeah.
are you excited then that this Barbie movie trend is gonna lead to a Polly Pocket movie in 2 or 3 years?
I would love to see what they do with that.
Yeah.
But if it's like the 3-inch high Polly Pockets, I'm like, is that really a toy that can fit in your pocket? Like the whole point of these things is that they could fit in your pockets.
Yes. Yeah.
There was a quote recently that I read that said, people keep talking about how this movie is going to lead to more movies about toys.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps it should lead to more movies about women. And I was like, hell yeah.
Yeah.
But also, I think toy movies are fun. I've always thought toy movies are fun.
Well, yeah, so I think we're going to talk about that as we talk about this movie from the broad perspective, because I do think it is such a cultural moment beyond just being a movie, quote unquote, about a toy, to your point. So we'll definitely get into that. You asked about sort of what this was like for me, toy wise. And it's funny because I had sort of a mixed experience. I brought my daughter, who's
Mhm.
7 and going to be 8 in a couple of weeks here. So she got to watch it, and she is very much in a Barbie phase. She has a Barbie dream house. She's got a case, like a suitcase full of my wife's Barbies that we've inherited over the
Uh,
years. She's got a closet of clothes. Like she's got an RV. Like she has
oh,
everything.
yeah. Hell yeah.
So it's really funny. It was really cool to watch her watch this movie. But then from my own experience, I didn't have a Ken or anything like that. I had 2 sisters who I don't even have like specific memories of them necessarily playing with Barbie. But like you, I was definitely an outside kid. I was going, playing sports and I was doing stuff. But when
Mhm.
I did have toys, and I guess like the boy version of Barbie was basically like Transformers or
Oh,
Ninja
yeah.
Turtles, right?
Uh-huh.
I definitely had those toys growing up. I loved Transformers. Obviously, it was a very simple thing of like, it's a car, now it's a robot that fights.
Uh-huh.
But I loved those enough to the point that when the movies started coming out, I did drag my wife to go see the first Transformers movie and
Uh-huh.
probably had like a very similar experience. It wasn't like as touching and thought provoking. It was
I mean,
obviously just like, no, these are robots that
smash,
are going to fight
crash,
each other,
boom.
right?
Yeah.
But for me, it was like, oh, that's that robot. So it's just funny in that sort of like full circle moment. And
Yeah.
that this is where things might be heading and just like more
Mhm.
toy movies. But I do hope that if it's just going to be toy movies, that they're more like Margot Robbie directed by Greta Gerwig toy
Uh-huh.
movies and less, I mean, the Transformers movies were fine, but
Uh-huh.
you know,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, there's a big difference there.
Well, it's also like there's some movies where they're meant to tell a story or like send a
Yes.
message, and then there's ones that are just supposed to smash, crash, boom.
Yeah. Yeah, they both have their roles to play. Yes.
They do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so fun little trip down memory lane. So let's take a quick break here and a note from our sponsors or from ourselves, and we will come back with Barbie. Pop Psych 101 discusses mental health as it is portrayed in pop culture media, and because of this, we often cover sensitive topics that can be triggering for some listeners.
We also delve into the characters and plots of these stories, and therefore, spoilers abound.
So please, use your discretion as you listen to the rest of the episode. Barbie is a 2023 movie that just came out in theaters. It's not streaming anywhere yet as of this recording. It is about Barbie and Ken. Barbie played by Margot Robbie and Ken played by Ryan Gosling, featuring an incredible cast, including the likes of Kate McKinnon, Simu Liu, Emma Mackey. The list goes on and on. America Ferrera plays a mom in the real world. Issa Rae is President Barbie. I don't have enough time to go through all the incredible actors and actresses in this movie. But suffice it to say, it is directed by Greta Gerwig, and it is centered around Barbie and Ken, who are having the time of their lives in the colorful and seemingly perfect world of Barbie Land. However, when they get their chance to go to the real world, they soon discover the joys and perils of living among humans. So, Hayley, that is a very oversimplified version of what is a surprisingly deep movie. I know I was not the only one who was brought to tears in watching this movie that was, quote unquote, just about a toy. So, in some of the articles that reference how this kind of movie plays out, it talks about an existential crisis that Barbie and Ken go through as a result of, I mean, the sort of initial launching of the plot is basically Margot Robbie's Barbie, as she refers to herself as stereotypical Barbie, is starting to experience this existential crisis because of America Ferrera's character, who works for Mattel and is just sort of like drawing Barbies like Depression Barbie and Cellulite Barbie. And it's like something's going on in the real world that's affecting you, is what Weird Barbie, Kate McKinnon, tells. We'll just call her Barbie. And off they go into solving this crisis and figuring out what's happening in the real world that is causing this Barbie's existential crisis. So, Hayley, when you hear this movie and this character be referred to as being in an existential crisis, does that feel accurate to you? And as you and I are therapists, what is an existential crisis?
Totally. Yeah, I think it goes from existential wondering to existential crisis.
Very good. Yeah.
And basically an existential experience or an existential wondering or an existential crisis is basically boils down to feelings and questions about what is my purpose? What is the meaning of the world? Why are we here? What should I be doing? What should you be doing? It is this normal? Basically, like, who am I? Why am I? Both individually and within the grander scheme of the world, right? So the first word is basically exist. And like, what is the point of existence, basically, whether that's mine or the world's. And basically, before America Ferrera's character is drawing those things, Barbie Land is just full of like joy and happy and comfort, and like there's no questions about anything because everything's the same every single day in the same way every single day. And so there's no space for thoughts and wonderings and questions. And then, you know, on the dance floor, she's like, does anybody ever feel like dying or think about dying?
Think about death.
Death,
dying. Yeah.
And suddenly, if you start thinking about death, that means you're going to be thinking about, well, what's the point of life? And that starts her existential crisis. And then when she does that, she changes the pattern up in Barbie Land. And then Ken starts to wonder about what he means to Barbie and what his role is. And he ends up in the real world, and his questions are, is this what existence is? Is this what existence can be like? What would it be like if my life was this way? And so then that also becomes his existential crisis.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, so I like the way you described that frequently it can just kind of start about a question, right? And I think when you and I are seeing people who might be describing themselves as having an existential crisis, sometimes it's triggered by things like a loss,
Mhm.
someone passing away, a loss of a job, a loss of a relationship, where all of a sudden things that were once stable are now thrown into question, right? Oh, well,
Mhm.
if my future is not with that person, or if my future is not in that job, what is my future? What am I supposed to be doing? I think is a
Mhm.
really good framework because we
Can I
see,
just pause you for one
yeah, oh,
second?
please, yeah,
We
go.
often frame existential crises as like the after the ends of something, but also sometimes it's after the start of something. So,
100%.
like, what is life with this person? What
Mm-hmm.
is life in this job?
Yes.
Right. So, those can
Mhm.
also be triggers for existential questioning because sometimes we think, like, oh, I got the job and that answers the question. Sometimes that causes the question, right? Like,
Or
is
like,
this the rest of my life?
yeah, or I just got married. Am I just supposed to go have kids now? Is that like
Uh-huh.
my future is supposed to start now, quote unquote? Is
Yeah.
that's all the rest of this is going to be? Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah, so great point that it's this sort of being thrown off axis in one way, shape, or form, and then that sort of triggering this self reflection, maybe that wasn't necessary before, right? Because things were just sort of normal. Every day was the best day ever. You were having parties and talking to your friends, and everything was as it was supposed to be.
Mhm. Makes you think of the Lego movie.
Yes.
Everything is awesome.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, there are definitely some parallels there because,
Uh-huh.
we see Barbie kind of have this typical for her normal day. And then once she has this question, do you guys ever think about dying? The next day is very different. And it reminded me of the type of day, that, someone who's in therapy might talk about having, like,
Uh-huh.
quote unquote, woke up on the wrong side of the bed. And it's like, well, what does that look like? Well, my I burnt my toast and I tripped coming down the stairs
Mhm.
and all these sorts of things. And the meaning that we take away from those sorts of experiences can kind of amplify the nervous thoughts or feelings that are already coming up because of random questions about the future and things like
Uh-huh.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. And our brains don't like gaps of information.
Yep.
And the thing about existential questions is 99.9% of them don't actually have answers. And so that's going to cause stress.
Mm-hmm.
And now stress, we use it as a bad thing, but it's not a bad thing. It just means your body is in a heightened state. And so, like, once you have higher stress, you have higher cortisol. When you have higher cortisol, you're more likely to misstep and stub your toe or burn your toast or whatever because your body goes into more of a survival or like fight flight kind of phase. And so something like the toast is like just low on the scale when you're trying not to get eaten by a bear that's not there, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as Barbie is acknowledging, and the quote is, some things have been happening that might be related. Cold shower, falling off my roof, and my heels are on the ground. So it's like this. These are her examples of things that are off, basically,
Uh-huh.
right? And she eventually is suggested that she should go talk to Weird Barbie because Weird Barbie knows things about the world. Haley, she's seen some stuff.
She's seen some stuff.
And I don't know if you saw this, but they have created a real Weird Barbie.
I'm so upset about it.
Oh, interesting. Say
Mhm.
more.
So she's my favorite character,
Okay.
obviously, not
Sure.
only because Kate McKinnon
Of
is the
course.
best,
Yes.
but because the whole point of Weird Barbie is like it's a standard Barbie that has been played with too hard, right?
Yes.
And so what I really liked about her was she represented all the Barbies that weren't as they came because they had just been quote unquote played with too hard.
This is a great point.
But now she comes like that, and it's like, okay, well, she's not weird Barbie. That's just how she arrives.
All right, now she's weird Barbie from the movie, as opposed to you being able to
her
and encouraged
representing,
to.
yeah.
Yes, yeah.
So I like she was supposed to represent all the Barbies that weren't kept pristine, you know, that weren't played with by Haley Roberts. But I mean, is like obviously one of the best, if not the best character in the movie. So like also totally deserves her own Barbie. And I would for sure buy one for my daughter. But also when I saw that, I was like, no, she's supposed to represent something and you ruined it.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, it's, I don't want to sort of jump to like therapist patient dynamic, but it was really interesting having weird Barbie sort of be this guru, be this person that's telling Barbie, stereotypical Barbie, a little bit about the world and giving her these choices, right? She says
that for sure was a therapy like metaphor.
Well, right. Okay, so that's what I was curious for you watching this, right? Because it's sort of this thing that does happen in therapy sometimes, which is like, this work that we're going to do is going to open your eyes a little bit, whether it's to the world around you or your response to the world around you. And that is information that can't be put back in the box, right? Whether that's information that you kind of come to on your own or insight that you develop within our conversations. And you can't really just go back to your life and hope your heels rise up off the floor again.
Yeah, no. And you also get to, you can't unhear something that you've heard. So like I will often say to like therapists in training that I'm supervising, I'll be like, sometimes you as the therapist have to take the risk of saying the thing that your patient might not want to hear. And then being like, nope, I'm out, which sucks as a therapist. Like it sucks to have someone be like, you pushed me too hard, goodbye. However, they can't unhear it. And I will often say that to them as like, if it's something that, like, obviously don't push someone too much too soon. But if you've been doing therapy with them and you're like, this is something they need to hear,
and they can handle
sometimes you got to take the risk of them being like, I think I'm going to stop therapy because they can't unhear the thing that you've said.
Yeah.
But I think a really good representation of what you're saying is the Birkenstock versus the heel choice. And basically she's like, you've learned all this stuff. You've heard all of this stuff. You now get to make a choice. Like, do you want to put the heel back on and just go back to the way that you've always done things, knowing what you know, but you can choose to like say like, I know this and like, I don't care. Like, I don't want to have to deal with this. And like, because it's a movie, obviously that is quote unquote not a good choice. But we also have narratives in our world about that being the quote unquote wrong choice. And I often say to my patients, like, you're allowed to choose the easy thing. Like, you don't always have to be challenging yourself and growing. And like, I think a general emphasis on growth is important, but like, you don't have to be growing every moment of every day. And like, you may be like, you know what? I don't need to go any higher in my professional career. Like, I'm good. And that is an equally meaningful choice as the Birkenstock, which is like, you've learned something new, you are curious about what it means, and you have the opportunity to go seek it out, explore it, try something new, see what it does for you in your world. In the case of the movie and in the case of the character Barbie, she's seeing weird Barbie. She's quote unquote in therapy because she wants to make those changes, because she wants to find out what's happening, because she wants to explore. And so for her, the valued choice is the Birkenstock or the like moving forward and exploring the world.
Yes.
Yeah.
So she, despite not being adventure Barbie, sort of accepts this other path as she's gently encouraged by weird Barbie to, you know, go out and know the truth about the universe is how Weird Barbie puts it.
That was the moment that I felt the most connected to Margot Robbie's Barbie. I was like, sometimes I'm not Adventure Barbie either, but I can still do it. Yep. Like, I wouldn't come in the Adventure Barbie box, but I can adventure.
Totally. Yeah, I think that's really empowering, and I think ultimately that's what Barbie, Margot Robbie's Barbie does is, I can't unknow this. I'm still going to wake up tomorrow with that same, do you guys ever think about dying feeling? So, she's in some ways forced, but is also, I think, takes ownership of, okay, I'm going to go figure this out.
Yeah, she's motivated by
100%
curiosity. Yeah.
Yeah, which is a healthy motivator, I would say, most of the time, right? So, Barbie.
Well, and actually, sorry to interrupt, but that's something that I've actually has come up in a lot of my sessions recently. Is that like in my approach, we talk about like fear-based choices and values-based choices, and we almost talk about them as though they are opposing forces. And I've said to people like, well, what if a fear is the thing that motivates a valued choice? So for example, you don't really like your job, you're wanting to change jobs, but you like are exhausted and tired and can't really get yourself to like apply to new jobs. Then suddenly it turns out that your company's going to be making layoffs soon. And you're like, I might be one of the people they lay off. And now suddenly you are doing your resume, applying for jobs. It's not bad that you're doing that. That's what you've wanted to do for a while. And it just so happens that like you experienced fear and you experienced anxiety, and that anxiety allowed or made it easier to motivate your valued behavior. So I'm like, great. Like, who cares if you're afraid and that's why you're doing it? If what you're doing is valued, it doesn't matter what's motivating it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they follow that curiosity, and I say they because it's both of them. Initially, Barbie thinks it's just going to be her, and Ken does what Ken does, which is tag along. As he asks Barbie,
stick his nose where it doesn't belong is what he does, Ryan.
No, 100%. Yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna try really hard not to defend Ken, but I think what I think is interesting is the sort of how Ken gets exposed to the quote unquote real world and how he then adapts, unfortunately, or reacts to that. But he says to Barbie, what if there's beach? Which is the one sort of quote that's stuck in my family is like, oh, what are you doing today? Oh, I'm doing beach. Or I'm doing therapy, or I'm doing lawyer. Or as my daughter would say, I'm doing field hockey. I'm doing cheer. So, so that's what Ken does, is he also wants to get out of Barbie land and kind of figure out what his role is. Who is Ken?
And initially it's who is Ken to Barbie, right? That's initially where it starts. And I think that's important.
Yeah. Oh, it's very explicitly laid out that Ken only has a good day if he gets attention from Barbie.
And the reason why, and I mean, this will probably come up later, but in movies up until recently, women characters have been defined by who are they in relation to insert man here.
Yes.
And so it is important that this isn't Ken's identity exploration. This is like Ken being like, who am I in relation to Barbie? And then when that doesn't turn out, that's when he is like, you mean I can stand alone without Barbie and take over the world and make a dojo?
Yeah. So, and that's the sort of initial exposure that they both experience is, they both experience the patriarchy pretty quickly. They get their fantastic rollerblading outfits, and then all of a sudden they're getting very unwelcome attention. And then progressively for Ken, attention that he really starts to like. People are genuinely interested in him, asking him what time it is, all these sorts of things that he's not used to.
Little did that mom know what she was setting off by
Yes.
asking for the time.
Right, yes. Meanwhile, Barbie is trying to figure out, her existential question, right? Which is, why are things changing for her? She initially thinks that Sasha is basically her owner, the sort of younger girl, and comes to find out that Sasha actually has some pretty negative views about her as Barbie. Even once the sort of acceptance that Barbie's in the real world wears off, it's like, oh no, you're actually really problematic, is Sasha's feeling about this character. That's what she is to her. This is a character. She's a doll. She's a toy. And it was fascinating to watch Barbie sit with that perception, right? And we can talk about some of the other sort of experiences that Barbie has, specifically of the patriarchy and being assaulted and, making assumptions based on her life. Oh, well, that must be the Supreme Court. And it's just like it's the like beauty pageant sort of lineup, or
was it?
yeah, I'm pretty
I
sure.
thought it was like a morning show, but
Or
yeah.
it
I
was
think it
either
was
that
like
or
Miss
reality
America.
show.
Yeah,
Pretty much. Yeah, that must be the Supreme Court. Yeah. Yeah, so we get this reality check for both of them. I was wondering, as you saw Barbie start to reckon with, how she's perceived, particularly by Shastra, but also by by other people in the real world. What jumped out to you about her sort of emotional experience?
Yeah. Well, unintentionally, what stuck out to me and what my thoughts were are also a theme that you and I talked about before.
Yep.
We started. Why do I always want to say the session before our session, Ryan?
Yeah.
What do I say all day? What are the words that I use all day? The concept of something that starts well-intentioned and was well-intentioned and is well-intentioned, and then as it creates a space for those intentions, we grow and those intentions no longer serve. And I know that was like very broad, so let me describe.
Yeah, please.
So when Barbie was created, my understanding was there weren't many toys that were like, it starts in the beginning, like there were baby dolls, right? There were toys that were like, you can pretend to be a mother to this baby. That was kind of like the female toy. However, Barbie was created with like, no, you can actually pretend to be a doctor, a scientist, an astronaut, a teacher, a mother, if you'd like, a sister, a strong, and then this is where the problems come in, beautiful woman, right?
Yes.
So it started out with this idea of like, women can pretend and, well, not pretend, but women can dream to be anything, and thinking that like if we get women, girls, pretending to be something they want to be, then they'll start to imagine what it's like to be that. And we talk about this a lot in our world. It's why representation matters, right? Like if a girl can see a woman toy as a doctor, it's like, oh, I suppose a woman possibly could be a doctor, right? However, she was created in the 50s, which was the end of the 50s, but the 50s, which was a time where all women were starting to believe that they could be more than just housewives and mothers.
Yep.
However, the concept of being skinny and pretty and white and blonde wasn't being challenged yet, right? And so they challenged the things that they were aware of challenging, right? Like women can be anything.
Yep.
But then girls like Sasha have grown up with like, of course women can be anything, partly because of changes like Barbie.
100%. Yep.
And then they've added their growth in other areas. Women can also be curvy and wear Birkenstocks and be black and have dark hair. And, like there's the areas that we are challenging are becoming more complex. And so the original thing seems antiquated or dumb or problematic because it opened up this growth. And it's kind of like the quote that you shared earlier about the mothers stand still so they can see how far their daughters have walked, or daughters can look back and see how far they've walked. But then also we talked about how Ken and Barbie coming to this world, they have these ideas of what it's going to look like and how great it's going to be. And then they get there and they realize, like, oh, what we intended or what we thought it was going to be, I thought it was going to be about horses, oftentimes isn't what we want it to be, or it gets carried away in a direction that we don't want it to be, or where the initial intention gets lost.
Yeah.
I yapped a lot. What'd you hear?
Well, I think so what I heard was, Barbie in particular experiences this sort of a reality check, especially from Sasha, right? Where she has a perception of who she is and what she's supposed to represent to girls and to women. And then some of the Sasha quotes, I think, kind of emphasize this thing that you're talking about of, yes, Barbie represented a certain type of progress, but there's also this sort of other thing that she's come to represent as well, which is, Sasha at one point says, women hate women, men hate women. That's the one thing we can agree on. And it's like, oh, wow. So there's this like heaviness to being a woman that Sasha, I think, identifies with as Barbie being a part of the problem.
Yep.
So for Barbie to hear that and experience that is like, no, none of my experience, specifically in Barbie Land, has like informed me of any of that.
Yeah. I'm supposed to make women dream.
Yes.
Right. But it's like, well, you started to represent less than that.
Yeah. Or like, you represented a very specific and maybe even to a certain degree narrow, version.
Skinny, blonde, big boobies.
Well, right. And the real world is way more complicated than that.
And
than even
diverse.
just
Yeah.
Right. And then even just the different roles and jobs that you can have, the world, unfortunately, is a lot heavier than just the job that you can do. And I think, and that was a theme that I certainly was noticing as Barbie was sort of learning about herself and growing and desiring to become a human. I was like, oh my God, please don't let this just be about Barbie getting a job. And they didn't. And they resisted that, which I was really grateful for, because it was really about her being a woman. Being human. Yeah. And they leaned into that. And I know we'll get to that here in a little bit. But, really where the movie kind of takes a turn for a little bit is, okay, they go off on this sort of like weird slapsticky adventure through the halls of Mattel. And, and Ken gets back to Barbie Land to insert the patriarchy, and Barbie tries to confront the people of the CEO of Mattel and all these things, and they try to put her back in her box. And thankfully she escapes all of that and is able to get back with now Gloria and Sasha. And then we really see the weight of, the real world that Barbie is experiencing, right? So they have this sort of mini commercial of Depression Barbie, because Margot Robbie's Barbie is lying flat on the ground and is just feeling the weight of experiencing Barbie Land under the rule of patriarchy and feeling sort of helpless to do anything about it, combined with what she's seen from Sasha about, the sort of impact or lack thereof that Barbie has had on the real world. And, the specific reference of, Depression Barbie sits around all day and watches the BBC version of Pride and Prejudice, right? Was a reference that a lot of people could relate to, unfortunately or fortunately. And I thought that was really interesting, because we see Barbie experience this weight, and even them naming it as depression, I thought was really valuable. I was wondering, did that feel like a surface level version of depression, or was there accuracy, did you feel like, in the sort of mini representation of that sort of adjustment, maybe disorder also version. That was a wordy question. I'm going to try again.
Yeah. No, that's okay.
Okay.
I mean, this is the point of pop psych, I think. Yes, it was good, but it did too little and too much at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Which I think is so often our answer to
Yeah.
that type of question. It was such a stereotypical example. It was Bridget Jones sitting in her PJs eating ice cream and crying and
Yeah.
that to a movie, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to like a lot of times depression looks like getting up, going to work, coming home, making dinner, going to sleep, doing
Yep.
it again,
Mm-hmm.
or smiling and hanging out with your friends.
Yeah.
And inside being really sad. So yes, I think naming it is great. Normalizing it is great.
Mm-hmm.
Stereotypical Barbie,
Yeah.
stereotypical depression Barbie.
Yeah.
I did just have a thought, which only occurred to me now as you were talking, but when Barbie sits next to that old woman and looks at her and goes, "You're beautiful," and she says, "I know," or "I know it."
Yes.
My reaction was, I mean, she's a little bit, quote unquote, too old. But Barbie was created for an older generation to be able to see themselves in a new light.
Mm-hmm.
And this older woman, like, being like, hell yeah, I'm woman, hear me roar,
Yep.
is what Barbie's intention was originally. And so I don't know, or I doubt that was intentional. I mean, Greta Gerwig can get a little bit metaphorical like that.
Yes. Sure.
But to me, that like felt like in this moment, I was like, oh, that's actually really nice that this kind of who Barbie was originally fighting for.
Yep.
She did do something for those generations. We've just moved above and beyond that, I think.
Well, and the woman who played the older woman at the bus stop is a like Oscar-winning costume designer. So this was like someone that Greta Gerwig wanted to, I think, honor and recognize. So
Yeah.
to kind of to your point here, it's like the people that came before us, having gotten us here where we are, even if here where we are is flawed and complex and problematic.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean that those people don't have value, and in fact they probably be recognized even more so as a result.
Totally.
And yet, right, I think watching this sort of crisis moment that Barbie is experiencing, whether it's depression or whether it's just an adjustment to the, experiencing the real world for the first time, it is a crisis, right? We can see this sort of sense of helplessness of all of her Barbie friends are now brainwashed, to call back to a word that was used before.
Mm-hmm.
And she has to figure out, well, how do I both save these people if I can, or, the sort of more existential version, how do I change how Barbie is viewed in the real world? How do I be anything more than stereotypical Barbie?
Yeah. I'm not who I thought I was.
Mm-hmm.
So who does that make me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's this sort of meta moment of, how she says, I'm not beautiful, or I don't feel beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And then the narrator says, if you're going to try to make this point, you probably shouldn't use Margot Robbie as an example, which was a great,
which is
call out.
literally the thought I had the second before the narrator said that. I was like, well, I mean, except the person saying it is literally stereotypical Barbie.
Right. Yes.
But I also think Margot Robbie is aware of that.
Absolutely. Yes. This is a very self-aware movie. Yes.
Yeah. And there's some women who are like stereotypically, I don't like the phrase stereotypically beautiful, are like culturally stereotypically beautiful.
Sure. Yep.
Who are like, who, me?
Yeah,
whereas
false modesty. Yeah.
I think like Margot Robbie's like, yeah, I know, I look like this. Thanks for noticing, I guess.
Yeah.
Which I think made that moment more powerful. So, I mean, Greta Gerwig, she's just good at what she does.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, to kind of pause on that note and acknowledge, what this movie is doing, right? Because I think it would have been very easy to let this movie just be a Barbie movie. I mean, as a parent of a 7-year-old, I've seen lots of cartoon Barbie movies.
Mhm.
They're pretty devoid of character development and emotional awareness, and
Yeah.
it's basically like, who
Let's go to
stole
the
the
beach.
jewel.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. Let's solve the mystery of the stolen jewel.
I mean, that's still kind of impressive.
Totally. Yeah, yeah. But, to have this movie be as emotionally deep as it was and have these characters go through this arc in the way that they did, I thought was incredible. Now, I don't expect, as you acknowledged, that we're going to get 40 toy movies with this level of emotional self-awareness. Um, but I hope that with the success of this one, as you pointed out, it's not just about a movie about toys, but a movie about
Mhm.
women, and we hope
Mhm.
that that's the takeaway.
Mhm.
And about women, but also about existential crises and depression and these
Mhm.
things that are so human and
Mhm.
so relatable, that people were watching this movie about a toy going to the human world and seeing themselves in her. I
Yeah.
mean, that's incredible.
Yeah. Actually, a moment where depression was really well identified is not in Barbie at all, but in Gloria,
Yes.
because she has a great, supportive, wonderful husband who she seems to have a good relationship with.
Yep.
She has an okay relationship with her daughter, which is like fair for having a teenage
Total
daughter.
100%. Yep.
Um, and she has what seems like a good job.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yet she's still missing something, right? Or
Mm.
I don't even like that. She's still feeling these things,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And I think that's a really lovely representation of depression, because it's
Yeah.
like there we have these ideas of like, oh, if you are depressed, there's something wrong or you're broken.
Mm-hmm.
Um, even when Barbie started having those feelings, someone was like, "You're malfunctioning," and like
Yeah.
that's kind of how we talk about feelings. I mean,
Broken.
literally,
Yep.
when somebody is sad, we ask them, "What's wrong?"
Mm-hmm.
Rather than just like, "Oh, I'm noticing you're sad. What's up?" Right?
Yep. The sadness
Um,
is a normal thing. The sadness is just
yeah,
something that you can be experiencing.
yeah.
Yep.
And something doesn't have to like sometimes nothing's wrong and we
Oh
just
my
feel
gosh. Yeah.
sad. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, my dopamine's acting weird
Or
today.
I'm watching Barbie and I'm just crying like
Yeah.
nothing's wrong. This movie's
Yeah.
just hitting me. Yeah.
Yeah. What? That felt achy but good is what
Mhm.
Barbie said about tears,
Yes,
Like sometimes
yes.
we just feel achy, even if
Mhm.
something feels good or even if something doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that was actually, I think, a really nice representation of depression.
Yeah, and what we see is that collectively Barbie, and Sasha and Gloria, build each other up to get to the point of maybe we can do something about this. And I'd be remiss if we didn't acknowledge the incredible monologue Gloria has, and just acknowledging as she watches Barbie have this crisis. I won't read the whole monologue, but the way that she starts it off, I think is a good summary, which is that she says, "You are so beautiful and so smart, and it kills me that you don't think you're good enough." And then from that point, she acknowledges all of these things that, as women, what is expected of women,
Mhm.
but in many ways there are sort of completely unrealistic or unfair standards or
Mhm.
expectations.
Yep.
um I have to imagine that, as I read, a lot of people had a particular response to that speech. Did anything jump out to you as you kind of heard Gloria uh kind of embracing that moment?
Yeah. I kind of had an odd reaction to that monologue, um, in that I like every part fully resonated.
Yeah.
Like women are told that they're paid less because they don't ask for more money, but then if they ask about money, they're considered money grabby.
Yep.
Um, and that's just one example of situations where women are told that they are at fault for their station, but then also are told that if they fight for it, they need to just stay in their box, right? Get
Mm.
back in your box, Barbie.
Yep.
this can be said for any like minority group.
Mm-hmm.
So the content I certainly resonated with. It felt a little too on the nose for me.
Okay.
It almost felt like we have to explain to you word by word what this movie is about.
Well, right.
So,
Almost like a speech that Greta Gerwig wrote. And it's like, how do I fit this into the movie?
it surprised me that it was in a Greta Gerwig movie. And the
Sure.
reason why is I feel like she tends to be a little bit less obvious
Sure.
about like, I mean, I think it was obvious even without that speech.
Mm-hmm.
The speech almost was like, here's exactly what we mean by this movie. And at first I was like, oh, come on. Like we get it. You don't have to like spell it out for us. But also, again, I mean, I might be giving her too much credit, but I think Greta Gerwig is very smart and very clever. And I'm almost thinking that, like, I'm probably going to get in trouble for saying this, but that, like, she's like, men need this spelled out to them.
Oh, sure.
So, like, at first I was like, oh, God, like, do we have to spell it out? And then I think the answer is kind of like, sometimes yes.
Well, and they're spelling it out for Barbie, right? Because that's part of it. Like she says, it's impossible to be a woman.
Mm-hmm.
And Gloria basically wants her to is agreeing with her and is simultaneously like pointing out like, yes, it's impossible because of all of these expectations, but
Mm-hmm.
also sort of that's not where the story ends. And I think that's sort of what's the interesting transition out of that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Well, and also like we can't just because it is the way that it is and it's stupid and it sucks isn't a good enough reason to just be like, well, I'm just going to lie here for the rest of forever, which like if that's what you choose, that's what you choose.
Oh, sure.
Right. But also like that's an empty life. And that can be a metaphor for anything. Like just because something's hard, does that mean that's enough of a reason to just not do it at all?
Sure.
And sometimes the answer is yes.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, she's like explaining like to people who don't know what it's like to be a woman in the real world. This is what it's like to be a woman in the real world.
Yeah.
And what I also really liked about that speech is she does it with the frustration of a mother. You know, like we as women tend to take it on and we get frustrated by it, but also it's simply just our reality. Like I've had so many conversations in my sessions. It's like, okay, so how are you going to ask for a raise, but in a way that it's gonna not come across too pushy?
Yeah.
And then I explain like, not that you are too pushy, but you live in a world where that might be how it's perceived.
Sure. Yeah.
So we are used to it as women. And I think when you see it as this is how this is affecting my daughter, I think there's an added level of frustration because you can't carry that for your daughter. She has to carry it herself. And that's frustrating, right? Because it's like I can deal with this BS, but like it's so stupid that she has to deal with it. And so I also like that like America Ferrara did it in a really like this is just reality, but it's like such a frustrating reality because it really felt like a mom.
Well, right. And in that sense, she's talking to Barbie, but she's also talking to her daughter, right? And I think her daughter who they have been disconnected, right? We sort of see these flashback scenes where they're not really connecting with one another or they're not really talking to one another. And for them to be able to share that frustration and acknowledge that this is something that they're both experiencing at different times and at the same times, I think is a great, as you kind of pointing out here, call out. Like even if it's not for Barbie or for the audience even necessarily, like there is something special about, I think, that sort of commonly held experience. And it's like, okay, it's not just you, it's not just me, it's not just my daughter, but this is all of us. And when we own that this is our experience, then maybe we find the energy to do something about it.
Yeah. But what can be done about it? That's also an existential question.
100%. And, you know, and in the small world of Barbie land, they can make the Kens go to war with themselves and call out the cognitive dissonance that exists. And then from there, they get distracted long enough that they're able to retake the Supreme Court. And it all is tied up with a nice bow. But I think what we're acknowledging is the sort of difference between, if that speech was just to her daughter, at the dinner table at night after school, it's just kind of like, yeah, okay, well, what can I do? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And what can I do about that? Me, a teenager going to high school every day. And I do think that it's obviously much more complicated even than Barbie Land can give it credit for.
Yeah, I also just now got really sad because I was thinking, like, oh, the way that it was done was it's like they go and they change the laws and they change the structure and they change. And then I was like, oh, and then you get to 2022 and Roe v. Wade gets overturned and all that movement that women like Ruth Bader Ginsburg did to change it just and that's I mean, scary and disheartening as well, but like that. Yeah, I don't think I have more to say about it other than that. I was like, oh man, you fought, you did all the things and you made all the progress. And then one day a couple dudes come in and take it back. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I guess is kind of what Ken does in this movie.
Well, yeah. And I think that's where, I imagine, I don't want to speak for anyone in this movie, but where there's hope in this, right, is Barbie being able to experience all of the things that you're talking about and still deciding that she wants to be a human, right? Still deciding that she wants an ending for herself. Because that's what she says. She said, I don't get an ending. And I think when she's sort of having this weird multidimensional conversation with the creator of Barbie, it's like, well, ideas never do. And it's like, well, I want to be more than an idea.
Yeah. And one thing that I just want to say, because it feels important, even if I don't know, she chooses to be a woman.
Yes.
And I think that yes, it is a human, but to me, I don't know, it like something feels really important. Yeah. And I also, what I love about this movie is there was the, men hate women and women hate women. And that's just one thing we have in common. And ultimately what saves the day is that like, oh no, women don't hate women. And I do think that is a transition that's happening more in our world, is that like women are realizing that like female friendships are cool.
Yeah.
And you so less frequently hear the phrase like, oh, I'm not friends with women, it's too much drama. You like don't hear that anymore. And when you do hear it, a lot of people are like, I feel sad for you.
Yeah.
So that felt really wonderful and powerful. I think only thing I don't love is that like, when she like ends up going to the gynecologist, that's like the, she's chosen to be a woman, and some women don't need a gynecologist. So
great call. Yeah.
I think that's like it represented what it needed to represent, because a Barbie doll does not have genitalia. And so they were like, look, she has genitalia, was what they were doing. She has stereotypically female genitalia, right?
Yeah.
And that was wonderful, and I love it. But I'm also like, oh, it was a movie for women, and we still managed to exclude some women. But again, we can't always do everything perfectly. Like we can only do our best. We can create a Barbie and hope that it teaches girls that they can do what they want to do.
No, I definitely sat with that ending as well. Like I said before, my fear was she's going to be like going to a
job interview,
headhunter or job interview. Yeah. And I think to your point here, I was trying to figure out if there was and I don't know, maybe I could ask you, I don't know if ideas come up, but it's like, is there another commonly held female experience that might be more inclusive, right?
Fear.
Sure. Oh, sure. But I think you're sort of acknowledging that they were trying to just kind of put a little bow on this and a little wink and a little nod. Yeah.
And like, I think you're correct. Like I can't come up with a better way of like
it's tough.
that like meaningfully represents like she chose to be a woman and also like Barbie chose to be a woman. Like,
yes,
how do you put those two things together? I'm not entirely sure.
Sure.
But it's also still kind of like narrowed it down to like a woman is her genitalia, you know?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Which
Even if it was like a joke, it's still
and like
how they
again, it's like it's appropriate for the doll, right?
Yeah.
Because like the doll doesn't almost funnily enough, like the doll is more representative of like genitalia doesn't make a woman, right? So so actually maybe Barbie's more inclusive in that way. Like go girl.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that was like I understand it. I understand the choice. I think it was a meaningful choice and a smart choice for a Barbie doll becoming human.
Yeah.
A little disappointing in the exclusivity of it.
Yeah. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about the sort of cultural impact here. I mean, I'm sure you like me read a lot of stories about men's difficulty and discomfort watching this movie and relationships that ended over it. I'm fascinated by
if your relationship ended over this movie, there was a lot more going on.
Yes. But I mean, and then this is sort of like also a way to kind of talk about Ken, which is, I think, and please correct me if I'm sort of speaking out of turn here, but like women were able to watch this movie and see themselves represented in a way that was broad and generous and specific. And certain men are going to watch this and see the way Ken was represented and feel stereotyped and feel diminished and feel pushed aside because that's what Ken is, right? And they are...
How does it feel to be the second character in the movie?
Right.
Or the second character in any story, right?
Right. And not just that, but he wasn't even a love interest. He was just Ken. And the song obviously is hilarious, but it speaks to some of what I assume are, if there were men who were uncomfortable or unable to watch this movie, it's because they probably related to this more than they realized. Ken sings, "I have feelings that I can't explain. They're driving me insane. All my life been so polite, but I'll sleep alone tonight." I mean, goodness gracious. It's a throwaway comedy song, but I think it taps into some very real stuff that men who are having a difficulty seeing themselves, in absence of a relationship, in absence of a person who accepts and validates them in the way that they're wanting to be accepted, right?
And also, I don't know how to word this exactly, but like male rejection is a really dangerous thing for women.
Yes.
Male feelings of rejection is a dangerous place for a lot of women to be.
Yes.
And men's reaction to this movie exemplifies that. Like, I'm sorry, the fact that like Barbie didn't want Ken hurt your feelings so much that you disliked an entire movie and you broke up with your girlfriend. Check yourself a little bit. Like, you're so disgusted by a man being not wanted by a woman that it like ruined an entire movie for you. And like, I think that, that's kind of oversimplifying it, but also like there have been mass shooters who, when asked what started it, was, I asked a girl out and she said no.
Yeah.
Right.
Or she humiliated me. And even if that's not what she did, like that's his experience.
Well, and the humiliation is usually simply
saying no.
Casual rejection. Right. It's not like pulling his pants down in front of the school and making fun of him. Right.
Yeah.
And like, I'm glad that he wasn't even that Ken wasn't even a romantic interest, because even then it would have made a woman's story about a man. Right. And what I was just kind of thinking was, I was like, is there a movie that I can think of where it's not about a man, like a woman's story who's not about a man, where that woman is not fighting or at war?
Oh, great.
And I
great
couldn't,
call
I was
out.
like, Brave. And I was like, nope, fighting. And then I was like, Hunger Games. I was like, oh, still about men. I was like, Divergent, kind of about a man, but also still just fighting.
Yeah.
And so I was like trying to think, like, is there a movie out there that's like, you know, there's a lot of movies that are just like about men being men with other men. Are there movies about women being women with other women without there having to be this like romantic interest or war?
Yeah.
I can't think of one off the top of my head. Like, leave comments on our Instagram, but yeah, which is like interesting. Like, either a woman needs to be this man-like, vicious, violent fighter, or she needs to be attached to a man.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the only examples that were coming up in my head, I was like, I was trying to think of like women-led movies, and they're like historical examples, which is like what's the movie Hidden Figures, about the women in NASA, right?
Oh,
But it's like,
oh yeah, that's a good one.
And like that's an example that came to my head, but it's still about the struggle, right? The non-acknowledgement, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I think there's, even in those historical examples, it's still about, not respected, not included, all those sorts of same conflicts.
And that one was a story about like,
and specifically African American women in that case.
Yeah. But also like about, like you said, like the female struggle, right? So like, and historical, right? Like again, are there any fictional?
It's not even fictional and fun. It's just real life.
When we imagine what women should be like, can we imagine them not as a fighter or as a person attached to a man? And I think that like, actually kind of what I liked about Gloria too is that like she was married to a man.
Yep.
And he was a part of her life and a lovely part of her life and a meaningful part of her life, but like not her point, right?
And he was not the hero. He barely did anything. He was just there, not in a bad way.
No,
but he just didn't. He wasn't the focal point. He didn't solve any of the problems.
He's not the reason for her.
Yeah, exactly
He's
right.
Just playing Duolingo.
Yeah.
And I actually really like that because oftentimes in feminist narratives, particularly men, but some women are like, oh, this is anti-man. Right. And it's like, just because you're pro-woman doesn't mean you're anti-man.
Yeah.
And Gloria's a really good representation of that. Of like, she's not like, F men, they're useless. She's actually like, oh, should I tell your dad? And they're like, oh, no, he'll be fine.
Well, right. This is a very healthy, supportive relationship. Like, and it's just not about him. He's just not.
And she still wants more for women. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it sort of feels like he's the Alan, which again, I think people had this perspective of Alan as like, oh, he must be gay. And like, no. There can be this portrayal of men who it's not about them. They can be there. They can not be representative of anything else. And they can be helpful and supportive. And they can just be Alan, but that's not a problem for them, right? No. And I think Dad was a good representative of an Alan, of just like,
the story's not about me. Yeah, I'm a part of it. I'm in it.
Yep.
But it's not about me.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, poor Alan.
Yeah. Well, not poor Alan. I think, Michael Cera really wanted to be in this movie. And I think there's some interesting stories about a lot of different actors and actresses for good reason who wanted to be in this movie because of Greta Gerwig and because of the story that was being told. And Alan is a great character.
But I say poor Alan because he just wants to escape Barbie land.
Well, yes. And he's, if anything, he has a little bit of a hero moment there where he's like fighting off the humans trying to come into Barbie land.
That's funny.
So, if you had a hard time watching the Barbie movie or if you refused to go because you weren't sure it was for you, I will speak for myself. I went with my father-in-law who had a great time. This was a incredibly, I want to say like refreshing, but also just like to your point that I think you've made throughout our episode today, like it's kind of sad to acknowledge how unique of a movie this is. But I'll just say, as a man watching it, it was unique to me, but not in a negative way.
So fun.
Yeah, so fun.
And so well made.
I can count on one hand the number of times I've cried in a movie theater. Especially I haven't been to the movies and, regularly, certainly since COVID, but even just in general, like on one hand, it's like a handful of Pixar movies and then Barbie. And I think that speaks to something, which is that when we, I think, give amazing directors and amazing actors like real leeway and freedom to tell these amazing stories, like this is what we can end up with.
Yeah, it was so fun.
Yeah.
You want to jump into reviews?
I think we should. Yes. Hayley, how accurate of a job did you feel like Barbie did in representing things like existential crises, depression Barbie, and then just in general, sort of like the human experience of some of these.
You're not going to give me a scale?
Oh my gosh, I forgot. Okay, now I'm going to start the whole thing over again. How long is... Okay, so Hayley, I'm going to give you, on a scale of 1 to 5 fantastic rollerblading outfits. I miss rollerblading, by the way. I had rollerblades. I don't know if you did. It's nice to see that that's still something people can do. Yeah. Maybe not in those outfits.
My friend had a roller skating party recently. It was fun.
Nice, yeah.
I can't say I missed it, but it was fun. I had a good time.
So on a scale of 1 to 5 fabulous rollerblading outfits, how accurate did you find Barbie in its representation of various mental health issues?
I think I'm going to give it a 4. Initially, my reaction was 3.5, but I bumped it up to 4 because I thought of like the female experience, particularly, ironically represented from 2 directions. The female experience as it is represented by how Ken and the Kens feel.
Yeah.
And then the female experience represented by like basically the whole movie and the speech that Gloria gives. That's a 5, I think. The existential crisis, I also think, is pretty highly rated because so often we talk about it as though it's like, my life is over. When really sometimes it can be 4 days. This actually seems like it happened in 1 day. But like very few days of just like really going through it, whatever it might be, and questioning yourself and questioning the world. And I think that's more common of like the human experience and like existential existence is like sometimes we have a few days where we're just gloomy and questioning and unsure. Yeah. And then we're kind of okay for a while. And then months later, a few days later, the next day, gloomy and questioning. And so I think that was also, and it wasn't like too surface level, but it also wasn't like my life is over. So I think that was pretty well represented. The way that I spoke about like Gloria's depression being represented of like my husband's good, my daughter's mostly good, work's good. I just kind of feel gloomy and sad. I think that was well represented.
Totally.
It is a satire. And so therefore, in and of itself, it has to not be fully truthful. And I think that's where it loses a point, is that it like has to be exaggerated or understated or manipulated or, Play-Doh'd around.
Meta,
and so I think So like that's where it loses a point, but that's such an arbitrary point for me. Like I think you can take it or leave it. And if you want to give it a 5, give it a 5. If you want to give it a 4, give it a 4. So yeah. Thoughts?
Nope, I couldn't agree more. I think if they tried to be any more realistic, it would require them to pull even more out of the fantastical world that they created. And I think
be less funny.
They struck a really good balance. Yeah.
Yeah. On a scale from 1 to 5, plastic cups with nothing in it, or plastic cups with something in it, and Barbie saying, "I'm not used to there being anything in there."
Yes.
how entertaining did you find the movie Barbie?
Okay, so I'm not going to keep you in suspense. It's a 5 for me. It's been a while since my whole family has been able to go to a movie and then have quotes and songs and outfits and things that just stayed with us for now weeks on end. And I'm so grateful to have that kind of shared experience. I really look forward to, as my daughter continues to get older, to having more of those sort of shared experiences. I don't know how often they're going to come. I hope that Greta Gerwig gets to do more stuff like this. Her next project is Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe. I hope there's more like fun human things that are going to be in that.
Oh my God, that's going to be so good.
Yeah, we'll see. I hope so.
I
That's a
trust her.
I know that's a tough source material though. So we'll see. So it's a 5, and especially, you know, we haven't acknowledged the sort of Barbenheimer of it all. I did see Oppenheimer first, and then saw Barbie a week later, and Barbie has stuck with me more than Oppenheimer was, which I think tells you sort of how entertaining and just sort of like fulfilling this movie was.
Awesome. I love that. Yeah. I didn't see it with anybody. I went by myself.
Nice.
And I wonder if that's why I have slightly lower rating than you. Because the way that you describe it, I can see like the jokes and the like, if you step out of the movie and then like, oh my God, when this happened, and then when this happened,
the sort of shared Margot experience.
Robbie. Yeah. I think it was great.
Yeah. So Hayley, do you know the Rotten Tomatoes scores? Should we do a quick quiz?
Yes,
what do you think?
Yes, let's do it again.
Okay, let's close this out here. Barbie, what were the tomato meter and audience scores?
So the tomato meter was 96 and the audience score was 99.
Okay, so I think...
hold on. There's going to be some men answering the Barbie.
So I know,
96.
Yeah, so I am honestly worried about whatever review bombing may have affected this, because I think I think your assumptions should be reflected in how accurate they are. I will just tell you from the website, it says the sort of critics reviews, the tomato meter is 88%, and the audience score is 83%. I don't think that's reflective of the sort of general consensus. I think there were unfortunately some issues with things like review bombing.
Well, and also like the general consensus, you and I are probably speaking to people who agree with us.
Yeah, that's okay.
So, you know, so 88 probably is actually the general consensus, because there's a lot of people who are real mad about it. I don't think I mentioned in the main episode, but there was some famous somebody who was like, if there were movies that treated women the way the Ken was treated in this movie, people would be up in arms. And it's like, dude, have you seen a movie?
Yeah.
So, yeah, like I think there truly are 12% of people who are real gruff about it.
We can let them be gruff and let them have their feelings, just like we let Ken have his feelings and figure them out for themselves. So, so thank you all for indulging us on a movie that's not streaming yet. I hope that if you haven't by some chance already seen it, and you've listened to this conversation, that you will go see it again, because it's that good, and we'd love to talk to you all more about this and other things that are yet to come. If you want to hit us up on social media, X, we're technically still on. I know. Well, we are on Threads.
That's such a Casa Mojo Dojo.
You're so right. I know. I just, we're available anywhere social media exists. We've even had audio voice messages left for us on Spotify for podcasters, which frankly I loved. And if you are a person who has left us a message asking or requesting things from us, thank you. And also please check our archives, because a lot of times people ask us to do things that we've done. So feel free to look through our, at this point, hundreds of episodes. So thank you all. As always, feel free to check in or request from us wherever you follow us. And thanks as always for listening.
Bye, Ken.
Bye. Bye, Barbie.